Hi, hello and welcome. I'm Karen Leader Scott, a member of KUF's Adult Education Committee. Our workshop today is coming alongside Real Talk about white people moving toward anti-racist ways. Our workshop contributors are Karen Akuyea Vargas and Airen Lydick. Karen Akuyea Vargas is founder and director of Living Life Leadership, the youth mentoring program of New Life Community Development Agency in Kitsap County, and has advocated for youth and their families in Kitsap schools and communities for over 30 years. She is founder of the Living Arts Cultural Heritage and has organized many Kitsap community events, such as Celebration of Hidden History, Weaving History Celebration, 9/11 Sacrifice of Service, and Healing Our Land, Healing Our People. Akuyea is a past recipient of the Linda Gabriel Award for Human Rights from Kitsap County Council for Human Rights and a Woman of Achievement Award for YMCA Kitsap, among other honors, and is an ardent human rights and civil rights advocate. Airen Lydick is a worker, facilitator, and relational organizer who seeks out collaborative efforts to increase healing, liberation, and joy from local to international levels. Here in Kitsap, his organizing is rooted primarily in the grassroots efforts of Kitsap Showing Up for Racial Justice, SURGE, Kitsap Advocating for Immigrant Rights and Equality, CARE, Living Arts Cultural Heritage, and Kitsap Equity, Race, and Community Engagement Coalition, the Kitsap Erase Coalition. And it's with great gratitude that you welcome you today. Airen, thanks so much for being here.
Hey everybody, Akuyea is joining us today via video clips that she and I had a conversation, and that'll be sort of the bulk of our workshop today. So the first clip is going to be a little bit longer, and it's focusing on some specific work about thinking about systems, thinking about the construction of whiteness and how that relates to things like policing. In this particular clip, we're going to be talking about that. So.
You know, how do we do the healing and reconciliation and the corrective work that needs to be done? Because we know that things, I mean, we have to take ownership of our behavior now, today. And we must look at history so that we can move forward in a healthier way. But history will teach us as we move forward. History, we should always be looking back at history so that it won't happen again, because it can happen again.
That's why.
Yes.
That's why I think like the restorative justice circles and other examples of that work are so powerful, because I think when we are learning those practices and also learning the different histories that those traditions come from, because across cultures, there are those histories. And when we're learning that, to me, it's like that practice is good for us in the moment, but it's also teaching us some tools to build things, build alternatives to police, incarceration, like segregation. It's teaching us ways of being that on that an ancestral level we know, because those are things humans have used for a long time. But we have the constructions of seeking power rather than connection have gotten us off that track, right?
Oh yes.
So that's why I'm happy we're doing that work. I think that's where I go with talking to people about allyship is, are you practicing any new traditions? Are you trying some restorative justice work, you know?
Yes.
And maybe you don't go to a circle, but that can mean introducing yourself to neighbors you don't know and trying to have a conversation with them about problems rather than calling the police.
Well, let's talk about that. Because if we look at the long-standing history of policing, especially policing on Black bodies, we go back hundreds of years. And even the entire European culture that was here in this nation was called into those policing practices on Black bodies. And you didn't even have to be law enforcement. In fact, at one time on the books, if you were white and you allowed a black person to 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 be in this place and that place, you were villainized too. So there was, on both sides, there was policing. The policing, those that was oppressing, and they were saying, you're white, and if you don't do that, we'll lynch you too. We'll lynch you too.
Yeah.
And so there was a amount, fear was brought into it, power and privilege. And the thing, all of this got out of hand. But when those things were being practiced, they became a culture, and they became an everyday practice. And now we have a problem with that system still being carried out in many different ways. The first thing, if I'm a black person walking in a white neighborhood, every white family in that community, I've been policed here on Bainbridge Island just because of my skin. My son, my family members have been policed just because of my son. We're sitting in the middle of a predominant European community that, and I can tell you the story. Our kids, when we lived on Government Way, because we had military housing there, most of the kids from Bremerton came up because we had a basketball court on Government Way. And so when summer came, all the kids was coming to my house, and they were having overnights, and they were all the boys, Marvin Williams, all of them was playing basketball right there on Government Way. And so they decided they were going to go down to TNC and get them something to drink after they were hooping, and they were going to get them some goodies and everything. And everybody was calling saying there's a black gang on Bainbridge Island. They were stopped by the police and harassed by the police. And I was like, oh my God. But that sent a very strong message that they couldn't walk down the street. They wouldn't have called the police if it was a bunch of their kids going down to TNC to get something from the store.
Because they didn't see them as a group of kids.
Nope. That all they saw was the blackness.
Right.
So those are the mindsets. That is what culture has instilled in many white European communities.
I think there's this thing there where it's a misconception among most white people that the only way to be racist or to do racist actions is if you are consciously doing it as a racist action. Is if you're like, I would like to discriminate against someone who is not white. It's like people believe it has to be conscious and it has to be overt. And when you're talking about look, that's taught as part of culture. Actually, with the harassment and the continued trying to return enslaved people, to where they were supposed to be, for white people of lower class to get in on that was to make them better esteemed in the eyes of the white people with money.
That's right.
And so for us to understand that so many traditions, we will admit, are part of culture, they're passed down. How we gather for meals, right?
That's right.
How people worship, the kind of even jokes, even art. We understand that that's part of culture and it is subconscious on some level.
That's right.
But we're not willing to understand or to admit that the way we think of policing and what it's for, that has a subconscious culture.
That's right. Unconsciously. It's just something that's the way it is. The first thing, when they see a big black man, they'll cross the street or they'll clutch their purses, and that is something that's been taught. That's a part of that culture as well, and that causes a lot of harm in the terms of the way that the police responds to those of color. And that is long history too. We need to talk about the history of policing and the response in the history of policing on especially Black and brown bodies, because it's very different than because
All right. That's our first opening clip, folks, and we're going to go into a second clip right away. But I wanted to start you off with that to sort of give a taste of one of the things Akuyea and I talked about was wanting to give an example of, you know, what are we trying to work toward, right? What kind of depth of conversation and then action out of that are we trying to work toward? And this was one of the things she said is like, let's show them a clip of talking about policing and talking about the history and talking about connection to that. So that's why we wanted to start off with that one. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to queue up a different clip that's more of an introductory feels to it. So give me 1 second here.
Start by saying right now it's 2021 and this is February. So of course, Black History Month. And what always happens during Black History Month? What's one of the things that happens?
oh my God, this is like terrible. I mean, we've got to find a way to break this cycle. This is ridiculous. It's like, you know, all right, this is the Black People's Token Month, and that's the only time that we really want to honor and celebrate Black history and the contributions of African Americans and all that they have done in this nation. And then after February, it's like, boop, back to the back to the grind. And so
all the things that are coming up, I keep thinking about whether I hear about it, you know, from you or someone else I know, or sometimes people hit me up to kind of find out about living arts, cultural heritage or whatnot. All the things come at the same time. It's sort of like, oh, we want to have a program, you know, to lift up innovators or artists or whatever from Black history in the US. But in the same breath, it's like, okay, also we want to talk about enslavement. And also we want to talk about this and that. And it's kind of like this tidal wave that needs to happen over decades and every month. But here it all comes. And also most of the requests are do it for free.
Yes,
always.
Yeah. It's very, and I can say all the years that I've been doing it, it has never come with any type of gift or monetary anything. It's just, you know, this is what we need.
Right.
And so it feels very oppressive, even in its nature, the way that, you know, they really want us to respond to some of their requests.
And then you're kind of in that position where, oh, you might see, is this the only opportunity to ever get some truth in front of these people? Like if you don't take that opportunity with no compensation, no support, does that mean they won't do it? Does that mean they won't self-educate? It's like you're in between the rock and the hard place there.
It's always been that way because we've always wanted to make sure that we were celebrated, honored, and that we were educating our community and bringing forth that hidden history and the history that has been buried or even erased. But you know, this year and in 2021, I just said, no, we're going to do Black Lives 365. That's what we're going to do. And we've got to change that narrative. We've got to find a way to break down those barriers and break down that systemic, confined, you know, that to me, that's still, in my mind, a system of oppression and enslavement, even in its practice. You know, we will allow you to be celebrated just for this month, but we're not going to change our history books. We're not going to change the way that information and the contributions are celebrated throughout our nation for 365 days out of the year.
And not going to have the honesty and the reconciling with the colonizing history. It's
Yes.
sort of like yes, to lift up, lift up the innovation, the creativity, the culture, the art, everything of African Americans. But what about the piece of obfuscating and trying to ignore, the history, like people my skin color of European heritage,
Yeah.
of the colonizing and the imperialism, and that is the flip side to that story. It wouldn't be hidden history if it weren't
Right.
for that, right? And
Okay, so we had a prompt connected to this first clip to share with you all, and so I'll put that up here on the screen just so you can see it real quick, and then I'll take it down. And that is just to think to yourself when you just consider it, think of over the course of your life or even just this year, what happens during Black History Month? If somebody who never heard of this, it's a person from another planet, or somebody who had no concept of this, and they said to you, what happens during Black History Month? Just sort of ponder that for a moment and think of what that means to you. And if anybody wants to, after you think about it for a second, jump in with your reflections on that prompt or on the video you just saw, I invite you to do so.
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks, Lenny.
My father was honored uh, for Black History Month this year because of his contributions to Bremerton history, and that interview was written by the Kitsap Sun, and I believe it's still on one of the KUUF website um, pages. So it can be read there. I believe it's still up. But my dad has had a very good history with the Bremerton community. He served on the board of um, I can't remember what it's called, but he was the chairman of the uh, um, I can't. I've drawn a blank. But he also served 8 years as the um, vice president of the Bremerton chapter of the NAACP, and he worked real closely with Lillian um, Walker and her husband, even up to the point that she passed away. And so he was very familiar with her, and that's where I learned about Lillian Walker was through my dad. And so it's been quite a good learning experience, and having somebody that knows the history of Bremerton, because my dad has lived here most of his life, and he was saying that there's other people that should be recognized, like Alice Egan's, and who had there's a freeway, part of the freeway is named after her here in Bremerton. He also worked closely with her. So um, uh, I've been able to get firsthand knowledge of the Black history of Bremerton just because of the work that my dad has done. And yeah, so it's been a real good learning experience.
Thanks for lifting that up, Lenny. You said there's a page of KUF site that has some of this history. If somebody has that and wants to put it in the chat, that would be great. If you know the site that Lenny's referring to, and to highlight, and probably your dad maybe talked about this too. There's a recognition happening this year, finally, kind of that reflection of that history that you're talking about and connected about the same time period with John Henry Dick Turpin, who was the first African-American deep sea diver, and he invented an underwater cutting torch and had these major acts of valor and bravery, and was never honored within his lifetime with the Medal of Honor, which he should have been. And this year, the Bremerton Downtown Post Office will be renamed in his honor, thanks to the work of, laying the foundation that your dad and Mrs. Walker and others, and then Akuyea, who we just saw in the video, building upon that through Living Arts Cultural Heritage, really bringing an awareness, to the senators that he needs to be honored and that needs to be recognized. And so Black History Month is such a time when those things come forward, and it's so important that we dig into what was all the work that had to happen, right, to make that recognition. Even like Loxie Egan's, road that was not an easy road to get that naming done, and that's such an important part. We can't only celebrate the moment, we got to understand the work that goes into that and hear that part of the story. So thanks for bringing your dad into the space today. That's a gift to the community.
Oh, I remember now. It was the Bremerton City Council that he served on. For quite a few years. And he really enjoyed that. He actually at one point was considering running for mayor, and but because of his age, he thought that he wouldn't have be able to serve on the council for an extended period of time, so he never ran for mayor.
Still, thank you for all his work, to your whole family for all his efforts. Yeah, it's great. All right, I have a couple more clips to show you. Does anyone else have a reflection on that first one you want to share before we go on? Don't be shy. So this next video that you're going to see is Akuyea and I talking about the work that lies before white people or people of European heritage of moving towards constructing an anti-racist identity. What that would mean. And so that's a little bit of what you're going to see in this next clip.
Well, you're taking me back because it's sort of like what can be comparable from our history, and in organizing, and what can we learn? And when you said, coming together during war years, it made me think of the stories of what happens after that coming together when folks come back, and now who gets the GI Bill benefits.
That's right.
Who doesn't. So it's like there is this time of crisis, and there is this sense of, to some degree, coming together in community.
Yeah.
But the second we have a normalcy coming back, it's like, let's get that cast back in place. And so this is the thing, is when if I'm talking specifically to other people of European heritage or white folks, and I'm thinking specifically right now about in the United States, for history, how to have that conversation and say, that would be an example. Do you know this story about the GI Bill and who was getting it and who wasn't? How that played into generational wealth. What's our GI Bill right now, right? What are we going to look back on in 20, 30, 40 years? People are going to say, that can't be possible. How is it that folks saw this? They saw the depth and breadth of this racism, and that they can just went back to this quote unquote normal. And what I really think about when I look back at that time and study, with mentors of the early civil rights era, is in terms of the perspective and the participation of folks who are white. I believe that there was not a really rich conversation about what does it look like for us to build our identity around being actively anti-racist instead of, because whiteness got made up, right? That ain't a thing.
That was a construct. That really was a construct.
Right. So, and that doesn't mean we don't have to be responsibility for what got constructed with it. We absolutely do. But unless we keep remembering, oh, that's a construct, we won't build anything different. We won't build I'm going to orient toward noticing the systematic racism, and my value, my identity, my sense of self is built around seeing it and challenging it. Because guess what? That's good for my own humanity and everybody else's, right?
That's right.
That's the work I keep thinking about. Like you say with the systems, it's not sexy because you got to convince people. The thing it looks like is saying at a city council meeting, hey, how come we use these rules that are built to keep people quiet instead of inviting them in? Why do we use these rules?
Yes.
But that's not sexy, right? Nobody wants to talk about that.
Well, then the other thing as well, when we think about a deconstruction, because my dad was in construction, almost all of my life. that I've been here on Earth. My dad always worked in construction. And then they would have to demolish stuff. They would have to deconstruct stuff. And then they would have to level it. And then they would have to, they would have to come in with the dirt and prepare and everything. And I said, well, if they're going to build something new, they always demolish that old building.
Yeah. And they got to really take it out of there, because if you lay a new foundation, you can't have remnants in there that are messing it up. That's right. That's
and so
absolutely.
I'm saying, since we know that was a construct, what are we now constructing? You've got to have a new construction, a new building or a new system. Now, we know everything's about systems, but what new system are we constructing?
All right. So I'm going to send y'all to your breakout rooms, and your prompt here is to think about, what are you for yourself right now, trying to deconstruct and trying to construct? What are you trying to break down? What are you trying to build as you think about this work of coming alongside anti-racist work? So I'm using the auto sort. So I didn't pick who you're in.
Airen, I found the link to the article I was talking about,
Great.
and I've placed it in the chat, so anybody can link to, if they want to, read the article regarding my dad.
Thanks, Amy.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll send you out to your breakout rooms. I'm going to give you about 5 to 8 minutes out there to talk about that. What are you constructing? What are you deconstructing right now in your own work? And I have you in groups about 4 to 5. So here you go. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're going to have a couple more video clips here, and then you're going to get to go to breakout again to discuss these two. They're both pretty short, and they're back to back. But while I am thinking about it, I'm going to put into the chat a link for you all, because right after we're finished here today is the final day of Visioning Our Voices weekend, which is a weekend full of Black History Month programming. And it's curated by Living Arts Cultural Heritage that Karen Akuyea Vargas is the director of. So I put the link to that in the chat in case you want to go there when we're done here today. There's going to be some really awesome interviews that the youth of Living Life Leadership did of various elders and Black business owners in the community. And they're just awesome youth leaders doing those. So I think you'll really enjoy. All right, so let's go to our next clip here.
Conversation that we have had often about when folks of us who are white have some kind of a switch flipped, where it's like, I'm starting to see something. I need to begin to understand. I need to do some work. I keep noticing that we of white skin privilege will fall into this trap of thinking, oh, it's only about just me being nicer, or me not judging, or me reading a few books. And that piece you just mentioned about the systemic, we're not taking it there. We're not taking it there, And
I believe until we take it to the systemic, we're going to continue to be in that caste system. Mm-hmm. And that is the same system that continues to perpetuate those oppressive practices, and I call them practices. We say systems, but those systems are the exact practice and implementation of something. That's what a system is. When we begin to talk about a system, that supports and holds and confines and continues to allow something to flow in the same way that it has for hundreds of years. And we've got to look at that if we're ever going to really talk about how do we interrupt the narrative, how do we change, because everything now is about the buzzword with equity, you know, oh, equity, 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 inclusion, inclusion, inclusion. And I said, those words are fine, but let's look at the systems that continue to perpetuate the inequities.
Right.
And you know, we can't just, you know, we can't just band-aid the stuff and think that we're going to get some real impactful transformation and change. And so, you know, we've been having conversations, you and I, for quite a while. How do we interrupt systems and
Okay, so like now this last clip that I'm going to show you. 1 second here. Okay, this last clip that I'm going to show you highlights this moment that we're in, where you might think of, for various reasons, culturally being in a crisis. And Akuyea is going to talk a little bit about the idea of not letting a good crisis pass you by. So this is the last clip we're going to end on, and then we're going to go to breakout rooms again.
what has really kind of just pulled the covers off of everything was the murder of George Floyd and the COVID all at once, that began to that everyone was stepping into what in the world was going on. And I think that was a powerful opportunity for us to begin to look at the systems, because all the systems began to break down, whether it was the health or whether it was the prison systems. You know, those systems were, you know, they were being impacted by these events and occurrence of a pandemic. So yeah.
Right. Well, one of the things with that overlap, like we have discussed many times, you know, a couple things. One, would the eyes of people who maybe didn't have any skin in the game, would their eyes have turned toward the murder of Mr. Floyd had it not been for they're stuck at home? It's the pandemic. They're seeking the social media to get their attention to something. So we mark that, right? But then I think all the things you said about the systems falling apart, I mean, we had that one conversation about, okay, you know, there's meetings that happen in these systems. You got your government meetings, you got your whatever. Well, now folks who are used to having access can't go in person. So now people are excited to advocate for remote access. Well, guess what? A lot of folks have been advocating for that for years because of disability, because they're elders, you know, whatever it might be. And now it's suddenly, because folks we have a position of privilege. Now we speak for it. Now suddenly it can happen fast, when before it couldn't happen, right, at all. So this is where I think about, I mean, you know, to get real blunt about it, in this time of COVID, I see these opportunities to have conversations with folks about getting on this trajectory of being an ally. But I also simultaneously have this fear that when COVID isn't impacting them this same way anymore, I mean, the allyship is like, oh, that's a thing I did during COVID. Like I learned how to, you know, paint my own fingernails, but I stopped and I went back to the salon as soon as it was over, you know? And so I'm really have been thinking through how to keep people in the game, how to help them realize this affects us all. This is about all of our humanity, right?
That's right.
But to be honest, I worry a lot about that, you know, we're going to have that falling away, you know, once folks exert their privileges again, because it's happened before, right? It's happened before.
Well, this is the thing. When everyone is affected, see now it affects them personally. So now it's like, oh my God, I never seen it. But what brought them into the game was that what really leveled the playing field was that your privileges was stripped as long as right alongside anybody else. Maybe now, like you said, you know, now they're seeing, their eyes are open, scales are falling from their eyes. They can see it and feel it because they've been impacted by it. And now there's some common ground here. There's a common thread of that that, oh my God, lives are being lost, whether you're rich or poor. You know, a pandemic will take you out, you know. And so we see all of these different dynamics that are playing out during this pandemic, and during even being able to get resources for the vaccine has exposed so much, you know. And so as we move forward, you know, I recall a lot that Bishop Lawrence Roberts said when crises come, what will we do? You know, how will we respond? And don't allow a good crisis to pass you by without making that impact, because that's the time to really move and change things.
All right, so although she's not in the room, just going to give appreciation to Akuyea for sharing these clips today, and I'm gonna have whomever wants to be the host reclaim it from me. Whomever is the Zoom host, reclaim it from me, and that person can send you to your breakout rooms for your final debrief, which is that what are you going to take with you, you know, after this crisis? What are you going to take with you and implement? And that'll be in your final breakout group, your topic. When you come back, I won't be gone because I'm going to leave to go open up the Visioning Our Voices session. But it was really a pleasure to be with you all today. And I hope that these words from Akuyea and the conversation we had are helpful to you all in prompting your continued work, and much appreciations for KUUF and all that you do.
Thank you.